Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy, and welcome back to our weekly reviews on The Mandalorian Season 2. This is Chapter 11, the HEIRESS. I think that's how you pronounce it, HEIRESS. This one is directed by Bryce Dallas Howard, returning from Episode 4 of Season 1. And we're going to go straight into it. I don't think we actually started last week's episode with this, but this is going to be very spoiler heavy. We're going to go through the entire thing, so let's just get that right off the bat. If you've been following this show, you know that we dissect everything from this. If you're new to it, make sure you've watched the episode before watching this, because we are going to go through absolutely everything. And there are some big reveals in this, big Star Wars reveals, especially from the animated series, which we're going to go into it all. But before we do, we're just going to go over the socials very quickly, and then we'll go straight into the episode.
Absolutely, guys. So if you're joining us tonight, if you're watching us tomorrow or on demand, we do our Mandalorian reviews every Friday night, as Chris just said, 10 p.m. GMT, 2 p.m. PT, 5 p.m. ET. Got them right this time. So that being said, for the videos that you may not hear about, the videos that are very last minute, because we do an awful lot of them without too much prep, the best way to find out when we're going live is, of course, to find us on social media. So Facebook at Cinema Savvy, Twitter at Cinema_Savvy. There are two main social media pages. That's where you can find us. We announce our videos. We do countdowns in case you forget. It's been a couple today. And my God, it's been very hard to do social media posts today. I don't know if the thumbnail was too much. We've seen some other channels going all out with character reveals, but we wanted to play it cool, so we kept using Baby Yoda gifs. I guess this is the one time when you can get away with doing that. But as usual, of course, what does help is getting everyone's support. We had a big influx of social media again, with a lot of people commenting along. So don't forget to do that tonight, because this is a discussion base. This is what's crazy. We don't know if this is going to be the most in-depth we do this season, because we know that episode 5 is likely to be the one. So we're going to try and tease what we think may come. But do like, comment, share, and subscribe. It does help us get those numbers up. We want to get more people in on the conversation. We're watching our Rocky series. We're doing them every Tuesday night. We're getting a lot of people commenting along to those, having a really good time. And we're actually going to begin by unveiling our next Star Wars bit of content, which isn't The Mandalorian. For you guys, you may have heard of something called the Holiday Special. If you've been here long enough, Chris did a drunk watch-along to it once, many years ago, before we did watch-alongs. But tying in with the Lego Star Wars Holiday Special, we have announced that we are going to be doing a live watch-along next Wednesday, the 18th of November. We've seen a trailer. We're going to go into this blind. It's a kind of combination. Chris, you summed it up best to me. It is both a review, a watch-along, and a reaction, all happening at the exact same time. That's something that I don't think we've ever done on this channel. So yeah, that could be fun. It could be fun. It could be abysmal, but either way, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, usually with those things, we always, give it a watch first and then give our opinions on it. But it is a big bit of Star Wars content coming out. And, we're kind of deep in Star Wars at the moment. Off air, I'm watching the Clone Wars, which I kind of wish I'd have watched it all before this episode today. We'll go into it more, especially Rebels. I need to get onto that. But no, Lego, especially the Holiday Special, I didn't realize it was coming out in November. I thought that would be a Christmas thing. I guess it's an early Christmas present to us all. Hopefully, if it's good. Even if it's not, I'm sure we'll have a good time with it. And yeah, definitely tune into that next week. So, the HEIRESS. We don't have a plan for this. We're just going to go straight into it. I guess we'll go in with initial opinions, because I don't want to say that we kind of differ on opinions on this one. I know that this is definitely one of your favorite episodes out of both seasons. I thought it was okay. Now, I think part of that is down to, as I just mentioned there, I haven't watched all of Clone Wars. Yeah. I'm familiar with most of the storylines, I would say. I did catch the ending. I did watch the final series. But there's some good chunks of it. And unfortunately, the chunks that I'm not too knowledgeable about are all the Mandalore stuff with a character who features on later in this. So maybe I think that's where the disconnect happens between me and you. You are seeing a character return, first be introduced into live action, but a character that was originally established in the animated series. Whereas I'm just kind of going into it blind. I'm aware that she's a character from the animated series, but I haven't had that history. So I thought it was just kind of fine. Again, from special effects, staging, everything like that. I loved the new planet, I guess. I don't know if the planet is given a name, but it's the one that you've seen in the trailers. It's kind of like a harbor or a docks or something like that. We haven't seen anything like that in Star Wars before, and I'm all after that new stuff, especially, we've done Tatooine. Get that out of the way now. Show me some new stuff. And we did get some new stuff. And yeah, in terms of like the action, I thought was staged very well, special effects, and we get introduced to Moff Gideon again towards the end of the episode, which was nice to see. So I would say this is definitely more plot centered than the previous episodes that we've had. It'll be interesting. I think we said this anyway, when all 8 episodes have been released, where you can watch them all as one thing. Because we didn't have great opinions on episode 2. We didn't hate it last week's episode, but you actually rewatched episode 2 straight into 3, and you said it works better as almost like a unofficial double-parter.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's what I wanted to kick off with. That I don't think it might have come across as being too harsh on last week. I don't think we worked. We both didn't dislike the episode. It wasn't what we maybe thought would have happened. I think it's a really fair way of actually saying that. I always watch this on my lunch break, sort of like 12 o'clock every Friday, so I have to avoid social media in the build-up. When your phone's buzzing at sort of 9 o'clock, it means everyone you know has already watched it, and it's time to put the phone face down for a bit. So when that started kicking off, I says, okay, something's going to happen. I'm not going on Twitter. I'm glad I didn't. And yeah, I always watch it then in the evening with my dad when he's finished work, and it's my sort of, okay, you know, you want to watch it twice before you talk about it. You've seen the initial, you've had the shock. Now you can look at it from a different standpoint, which, you know, had it been a year ago and I'd seen episode 5 once, I'd have been speaking very differently to what I did within watching it a second time 2 hours later. So because we missed out watching it last week with him, I said to him, I says, okay, we're going to watch episodes 2 and 3 together. I says, don't worry, it's an hour and 10 minutes combined. It's not 2 hours. And I was quite surprised, actually, because I didn't dislike episode 2. It's just different when you wait a week. And this is where The Mandalorian has those moments where I prefer the weekly episodic series. I think it suits it better. But when you had something as episode 2 going straight into 3, that worked so well back to back with one another. So, you know, there's the highlights of dropping a series weekly. There's a highlight to doing it all at once. And certainly 2 into 3 did help that. However, today's episode was another story. I saw the odd tweet. I had one of my friends text me say, like, this is one of the best ones. That's what I'm going to say. And I didn't have too high expectations because I knew it was the boat one. And as you mentioned, I wanted to go somewhere new. We discussed months back. We haven't really seen boats in Star Wars. You've got the little sailboats from episode 9, but in terms of like setting, and granted, not actually here long, it just felt really cool, really different. And this is what the Mandalorian can do. You can take you to new places. It can, you know, granted, it's scum of the earth, it's bounty hunters, it's this and that, but just the passageway on a boat, it felt like Skyrim, but with Star Wars characters.
Yeah, no, and I remember when I saw the trailer and you were seeing these boats and like fishermen ferries and everything like that, and I thought, why would, in a world with Star Wars with, you know, vertically taking off and landing spacecraft, why would you have on the water boats and things like that? But it did occur to me this is sort of like a fishing village, and it would probably make more functional sense to still have a boat and still fish in a conventional way. You wouldn't do it with a spaceship, but they do integrate it where they talk about trading and passing it off onto ships and things like that towards the end of the episode. So no, it was just kind of, and it's kind of refreshing to see a planet or a location that maybe isn't as technologically advanced as other ones, you know, like a Coruscant or something like that. It felt very, I don't know, it felt more raw. It just felt different. And that's what I needed. It was something visually we haven't seen in Star Wars before.
Yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning the first big story point is we're only on the boat for like less than 5 minutes. I mean,
I thought we'd be longer. Yeah,
even before that, this episode at 35 minutes run length, 5 minutes shorter than last week, felt a lot longer in the way that they crammed so much in. I'm just going to jump in and say I thought the editing, the progression of arcs, locations in this, I thought was immense. There you weren't ever at one scene too long. You kind of got there, left, and went away with it. No dragging out scenes. It was just bizarre that it felt longer watching episode 2. And granted, it is longer, but episode 3 kind of hits you like, whoa, okay, that was 30 minutes. That felt like we've had like an hour's worth. And that was a really big thing. And that boat scene was, you know, going, and we're going to talk Clone Wars a lot in this. So guys in the comments at home, obviously do comment. We're going to go a bit more maybe in depth into stuff we haven't been able to do yet in that lore stuff. But starting off with the Mon Calamari and the Quarrens, 2 species which, you know, background characters, Admiral Akbar, Admiral Raddus, Admiral Akbar's apparent son in episode 9. We got a Mon Calamari, and it's really cool because a Mon Calamari, and then he spoke as a parrot, and that's not me like taking the mick. I was like, oh, he doesn't sound like all the others. Like, okay, that's a bit different. Okay, And then all the Quarrens are suddenly like redneck hillbillies that are all crying about an election result. And it was so strange because we're going to get into accents even more later when it comes to officers, which is going to be really fun to talk about. That's how sad we can get with Star Wars, guys. We're going to talk accents. But that really threw me. And I'm not saying it's a criticism. I'm not saying it's a compliment. But it was like, yeah, this is different. Like, and it's what you said, going to that new place where you had a Mon Calamari that sounded exactly like Admiral Akbar. My dad said, oh, look, I've seen him before. I was like, you've seen his species, not him. Mm-hmm. He's wearing like a jumper as well. But yeah, again, it's not humans, it's not bounty hunters, it's just like villagers. And being really sad in my Star Wars knowledge that, that couple, the frog lady and man, they wanted to settle there. That's the area they had to settle at. So I learned that watching episode 2 again. They picked that planet Y, and I can see why. It's a water planet, and it's the water species. And how easy could it have been for them to say, oh, look, they're on Mon Calamar because it's the water planet. But we just went somewhere a bit different. And I think as minor as it is, it can make a difference. It can let you do new things. And, it was just cool to see. Very strange. But again, it felt very real. And I think that's a testament, again, to Good Waffle on is the sequel trilogy. Everything Disney done, they've got that perfect blend of costumes and prosthetics.
Oh yeah,
CGI characters, and again, it's looking at, and we're going to say the same time. Not only does it look great, it's that budget they've been able to do this on looks remarkable. So that's my last thing about fish accents.
I will say about I do think it is worth bringing up because this is kind of a problem that I have with watching Clone Wars, and I'm maybe in Rebels. I haven't got to that yet, and elements of Mandalorian where you have these alien species and. It's been sort of determined in the series before this point. You know what to expect when you see a certain species, how they talk and everything like that. It's weird when you get to episodes of Clone Wars and you've got, God forbid, like Zero the Hutt, right? We know what the Hutts talk like, but then he has that voice. Greedo, I believe, even talks in conventional basic, but then when we see him in A New Hope, obviously he has his own dialect, Rhodian. I think it is that weird disconnect. So when you are seeing these things that have an established way that they talk and everything that we've seen before that point talks in that way, when it's suddenly changed. Now, it's a big universe, they all grow up differently, different upbringings, different parents, different surroundings, everything like that. Their voices all wouldn't be the same. But I think it takes you out a little bit. You're like, oh, that doesn't sound right. And as a Star Wars fan, you can sort of clock the little details like that. So I do think it is worth mentioning because I do wish there was some more continuity with that. It would have been nice to have a similar sounding voice, I guess. I don't want to sort of like harp on the point or anything, but going back to what you said about the effects and everything, him free falling onto the planet at the beginning, yes. just everything, like, my God. You can definitely see, I don't know what the budget is for this thing this year, or if it's basically the same as season 1, or if they've been given a bit more money.
I think from the rumors so season 1 was 120 mil, which worked out like 15 mil an episode. Mm-hmm. I think it's the same, but Jon Favreau did say that this year we haven't had to build a new technology in a new studio.
Right. Okay.
So I can imagine that we don't know how much it costs. Say it was 20 mil, you can see they've invested that 20 mil because it looks better again than some of the films, and that's not a criticism of the other films. This is a TV show doing this, and it's the same for Netflix and The Crown. For those high-end streaming services, do look better than films because you can see where they're putting the money in, and I think that goes a long way. And the difference between Star Wars and The Crown is that this isn't a period piece. This is action. This is space. This is miniatures. This is CGI, wars, lightsabers, everything, and it just looks like it's cost twice as much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, definitely. And if we get sort of like more into the episode now, there was actually, and you mentioned like the two-parter thing with watching episode 2 straight into this one. We mentioned last time the spider eggs being very reminiscent of the ones from Alien, the way they folded out and everything. Well, I guess you kind of have a continuation with that with this, where Baby Yoda's given this sort of soup at this tavern, and we actually have the full-on face hugger this time. That's where my mind went to straight away. I don't know if that was sort of like another link to Alien from the last week, but that's the first thing that came to my mind with that.
It was funny because, the moment, not that it's a bad thing, but every time Baby Yoda has a new interaction with, whether it's a wooden spoon, a bowl, an egg, a spider, it's like there's a new toy on the horizon. And the Baby Yoda bowl, free with face hugger, because I thought that as well. Like, and I love the little Mando, but I don't play with your food. I don't know. It looks like he stabs like its leg and it drops in.
Yeah.
it's this fascination that he's, and I like the fact that he looks at those eggs when the couple reunite, and he's just like,
this
hungry.
That's kind of blew up on the internet a bit, hasn't it? Or in articles or something. I've seen people say like, "Is Baby Yoda all good? Is he committing mass genocide?" I've seen all the articles, all the headlines you can imagine. Believe me, but it's fine. It is kind of like horrifying. Like when he was doing it one by one, you were like, "Oh my god, Baby Yoda, stop!" Like for the love of God, there's like a finite amount of these eggs, like the last of their generation for some. Whatever happened to those frog people? I want to know that story. Maybe that could be a Star Wars story. Why are they the last two frog people in this universe? I want to know that. It was just kind of nice. It was a cute kind of dynamic, but he is a kind of, we've seen him eat small frog things before back in season 1, also directed by Bryce Dallas Howard, where he ate the frog thing in that episode. You're right there with the merchandise. It is coming thick and fast. I am picking up my Baby Yoda this year. I didn't last year. It's going to happen this year. But you're right. Every single thing you see, it's like, that's another Funko Pop variation. And they're going to do it. They're already doing it. It's going to happen.
They've already put the, if anyone's got your Mando Monday orders, they've already got Baby Yoda in the egg canister. Time to perfection.
Yeah, it's happening. Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say, so the bar scene's cool, and then I don't know if we're jumping forward. I'm going to call it the mini Kraken.
Before that, I did think it was very easy that Mando fell into that trap because the guy clearly wasn't trustworthy. And at this point, you know, Mandalorian's been through the ringer. He's had a lot of people double cross him, triple cross him, and everything in between. The guy was clearly shifty and didn't have his best interests in mind. And for some reason, maybe it was like Mando didn't have any other options, so he had to take this guy's word for it. But when it turned out it was a trap, and I was like, you know, I don't want to go into the archetypal Admiral Akbar line, but I kind of do. It's like, well, how didn't you see this coming? He acts surprised that it happened. I thought that a character like that would be prepared for something like that and be able to handle himself. It sets up the episode, but I did think that was sort of like a lapse in the writing maybe for Mando and his smarts at that point.
Yeah, I think the big thing with this one, the reason it caught me off guard was because it's like the Jurassic Park. Do you want to see it get fed? I was like, oh, okay. And the bit that threw me, and maybe everyone else, because we spoke vaguely about it, it's the fact that he hits sort of Baby Yoda into the pool like a hockey puck. He just slaps it straight in there. And I was there like, oh, he's got like 5 seconds to get him out. And then he got eaten. And obviously, the first time around, I didn't see the lid close on the baby thing because I was so like, what has just happened? And I think that's what maybe made it better for me, that I expected the trap on Mando, not for them to go for Baby Yoda, because it's always the way around. We'll kill the Mando, then we'll kill the Baby Yoda. And this one was just... We never saw the creature. We mentioned it's like the Kraken, probably the best sea monster in cinema, and it had little tentacles, and it's got the mouth thing, and
the mouth wasn't it? Yeah,
swallowed him whole, and then we actually have a bit of peril. You know, he closed the lid on him. It reminded me of Jabba's palace when they were like laughing at him down the pit. However, that brings us, I guess, to the big reveal, to the biggest talking point, the thing that I didn't expect today. I expected something, but not this. The Mandalorian reveals bringing in Bo-Katan from animated Clone Wars, Rebels, straight through to live action. We knew this was coming, but we didn't know when. I did not expect it in this. I think we may have had discussions last year, and I said, you know, Katie Sackhoff's going to come back. I want her to die by Moff Gideon to get the Darksaber. We'll get to discuss that later on because we obviously know a bit's happening with that. But I thought she'd always be here to be in flashbacks. But we had a Prime and Center action. Looks like animation to life. Some of those shots looked animated. I know it is them in the costumes, but they did a really good job on instinct of that first action scene. Just, I'm going to go into this now, seeing Mandalorians in live action actually fighting, because, you know, Boba Fett's not all that. And we've had this discussion 2 weeks ago. He's never been all that. And in the animated series, whether it wants to be Rebels or Clone Wars, they've always been like the super soldier. You know, we had a little bit in season 1 with his group of people, but that was more like you had your War Machine type guy, and it was a bit cheesy, flying up, shooting them, and flying away. This time was like proper, like Mortal Kombat fighting games, Arkham Asylum, just beating the shit into people, kicking them, shooting them, doing everything. And we got it again inside the first 10 minutes of the episode. And I didn't expect it this soon because it felt like it should have been this big reveal. I always go back to Bail Organa when we watch Rogue One, and he steps out of the shadow and you have the Force theme play. That's how you do a really good reveal. But why not? They're Mandalorians. So it was really satisfying to see that. And then I clocked the helmet and I was like, that's Bo-Katan. Like, don't even try and delay taking that helmet off. Just get it off. And
Well,
and this is the thing. So this is what I love, because obviously the talk, I'm sure you've had your friends say this year of the year. People will say, so Mandalorian can't take his helmet off. You're like, yeah. And then people will be like, so why do these Boba Fett and Jango Fett do it? Why do these do it animated? It's a question I've asked many times by my friends, and I'm kind of there like, so well, I don't know why they're different. And we kind of had an interesting concept for a bit of lore, maybe. They kind of said that, you're this basically religious side of the Mandalore, whereas, shouldn't say it, but I'm the royal family. Like, this has been here for generations. I can basically take my helmet off. Shut up. And I think that's going to go a long way for people like us that don't really care that he doesn't take his helmet off. I think that makes the door interesting, that we're now getting a bit more in depth into Mandalore, because off a tangent of looking at the animated stuff, we only ever really see, here are good Mandalorians, here are bad Mandalorians. It's Death Watch or it's Duchess Satine's family. It's the leftovers from Death Watch who are now good, and now it's the evil Empire Mandalorians from Rebels. So it's always been that really two-dimensional good versus evil. And sometimes there's nothing wrong with that. But in that one conversation, we now had a deeper insight into an aspect of Mandalore. And you got to think, if it's a planet, they're not all going to be the same people. So I thought that was a nice spin. And also, let's be honest, that scene was there to serve one purpose. It ends that conversation of, why can't he just take his helmet off like the others? I don't know if I've overlooked into that, but it's something that I've seen crop up online over the last year or so.
No, I've always taken it as and we even kind of got this with episode 1 with Timothy Oliphant's character, where he sees this Mandalorian, he doesn't realize that it's Boba Fett's armor, obviously, and he takes the helmet off and he goes, "Oh, okay, this isn't a proper Mandalorian." And I always just took it that you've got this sort of like old creed that lives by that rule, that if you wear the helmet, it's kind of like a 300 Spartans kind of thing. They're prepared for war. You live, die with that helmet on. And then you probably have the people that wear it as more of a symbol of Mandalore as a planet, but they're more lax with it. They can take it off and on. I don't know much about the Mandalore history. As I said, like, I'm still working my way through Clone Wars. I've just restarted it, so it's going to take me a while to get through. There's a lot of episodes. I think there's like over, oh, Christ knows how many episodes I've got to get. Yeah, the ridiculous amount. I'll get through it eventually. But see, I kind of I'm coming at this more from like just a casual fan perspective in terms of the character of Bo-Katan, because when she said the name, and obviously chatting with you when it was the pre-production and they were doing the cast announcements, I was aware that she was playing a character from the animated series. That being said, I really know nothing about her character and her history, so for all intents and purposes, she was really just like a new character. I would be like average Joe watching Mandalorian every single week. Number one, it's great that they brought Katie Sackhoff back. She voiced the character in the animated. It's really nice that they gave her the shot for live action. Hats off to them for that. And especially if they did make her look visually like her character from the animated series, that's brilliant. In terms of her actual character here now, this is just one episode. We don't know where the rest of the series is going to go. I'm pretty confident that she'll come back either towards the end of this series or I think that's pretty much where it's going to go, especially surrounding the Darksaber and our villain with Moff Gideon. I think it'd be ludicrous if she doesn't come back for the rest of this series. So maybe we'll get more to her and I'll see more sides to her. As her performance is in this, I found her character to be a little bit wooden, and I think this is where we differed in our opinion. We chatted a little bit once I saw the episode earlier today. I didn't really get much from her character. She was just sort of generic, monotone, badass chick, and she wasn't really anything beyond that. I didn't really get any sense of personality or history or anything to her. She wore the armor, she kicked ass, and that was kind of it. And that can be fine, but I was expecting a bit more from her, and maybe it's good because I am a fan of Katie Sackhoff. I loved it's always the one everyone goes to because it's the only thing anyone knows that she's done, unfortunately. But Battlestar Galactica from the mid to early 2000s, fantastic as Starbuck, absolute quality actress. And I know that she is a great actress, but I just didn't get much from her character in this. Granted, it's only just over half hour long, and it's doing a lot of stuff in the episode. It's having to set a lot of things up, and Mando and Baby Yoda are obviously the focus where it should be. But I'm hoping that we get a bit more of her. And not to mention that, but she has sort of like two sidekicks as well, who I can't tell you their names. I can't tell you anything about their personalities. I know that you mentioned one is played by a wrestler. that's great, but we didn't really see her do any wrestling, at least with Gina Carano, who's UFC fighter. We see her exemplify that in season 1, where she's introduced, where she fights with Mando. That sort of like burly kind of, muscle bound woman that she is. We see her put that into practice. Didn't really get anything with that with this Mandalorian. And then there's a Cockney Mandalorian who is just there. So it's kind of frustrating. I think that you could have stripped it back to just be Bo-Katan and Mando. Maybe that would have kept the focus. You did actually say, because you wasn't sure if these 2 other Mandalorian characters were also from the animated series or from some kind of iteration. Apparently they're not. They're new characters. Maybe we'll get more of them, but this is kind of where I found this episode more average, is that we're introducing these characters great, but they didn't really feel like characters to me. They were just sort of there, a kind of undefined personality. And they're all impervious. They're all indestructible. So when we get to later action scenes, which we'll talk about later, I didn't really get much sense of peril or tension or anything like that. It felt like the action scenes were just going through the motions. Like I could have just put it on fast forward and got to the ending.
So that's a good point. So obviously the Bo-Katan thing, this is going to be interesting, that because of her lore, that was like a cool moment for me. But it was, I don't think they overhung on it. And I'm glad they didn't, because me and you have discussed well over the last year, bringing in potential spoilers. Rex, we know Ahsoka, we'll speak about that later on. Boba Fett, all these names. Timothy Oliphant's character, I mean, obviously we did get a big backstory, but he was a lead in that episode. That's his episode, not Mando's. And we all had that question, are they doing too much? Are they throwing in too many of the animated cast in there? Because season 1 was Mando and Baby Yoda with Gina Carano and Apollo Creed. We haven't got to Apollo Creed and Gina Carano yet in season 2. We've got to Moff Gideon finally, but there's a lot of things at play, and it's always risky to expand that big expansion style of we're going to bring in. I mean, it happened in Rebels. In Rebels, they brought in all the Clone Wars lot. In Mandalorian, they're bringing in not just Clone Wars people, but Rebels people now as well. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they did it. And this is, I guess, the first example of that. And this is where it's interesting to get the casual fans' opinions, because if they'd have waffled on her backstory, it would have just been like, well, what was the point of learning that right now? And this is where I'm glad you mentioned it, because she must come back. The way it's going to go, I'm not going to predict this series, but whether it's season 3, it's quite clear that there's a bigger story happening now, and we're finally being alerted to that in terms of the the planet Mandalore, the Mandalorian people waging war against the Empire. We still don't know what the Purge is. It was name dropped again today. It was name dropped to the end of the final season. We know Moff Gideon's involved. He was obviously in this, but he got the reputation of has he got it? Which we know he's got it. And there were some really interesting things, and this is where the second viewing helps a lot, because the side character, so Sasha Banks is one of the biggest wrestlers right now, and she was in that trailer, the hooded figure. And it was like, oh my god, Sasha Banks is in Star Wars. Luckily, it wasn't as bad as when they got the guys in the raid in to dress up in a stupid costume and get eaten by a CGI circle. I think she's coming back, because I don't think you can cast her in that of too many action scenes. I thought the Londoner was Fen Rao, who's not. I did a bit of searching after. There's so many weird Mandalorian names. You have to always Google them, check, is this the right one? We were even chatting before, I always get mixed up with Satine and Sabine, which is quite obvious now. But this is what's going to be interesting. I think we're going to get this a couple of times this season, where obviously Ahsoka, we all know Ahsoka more so than Bo-Katan, because Bo-Katan was a side piece to Duchess Satine. Bo-Katan was a side piece to Ahsoka whenever they were on arc together. And going back to Katie Sackhoff, because I've not seen her in anything except Riddick, it was weird for me, because I kept saying she looks like Kevin from, not Kevin from Home Alone, Kevin from Shep. She looks like Mary from, when they're at the ski resort and Mary's got the weird headband in Dumb and Dumber.
Yes. No,
it clicked me, because I said she looks like someone, but I can't fully understand who. And I think the fact that, when did season 3 come out? Maybe 9-10 years ago now for Clone Wars, that Katie Sackhoff was, I'm not saying she's a big name, but a live action someone that's been in a very famous franchise to go into, voice acting, as has many people in Clone Wars, like David Tennant was in it, Jon Favreau is in it, loads of people have done it. But to get a character that looks a bit like her, come back to Rebels, then make that path from Clone Wars Rebels to live action was remarkable, because we know we're not getting Ahsoka as that way. We're getting Rosario Dawson come in to play Ahsoka, which is going to be very interesting to see certain people's reactions, because if you haven't done a bit of research, there's a court thing happening with it too, which is going to have a couple of people raising some questions on the day. I think I'll tell you about that afterwards.
Oh yeah, no, I haven't heard about that. That's
so
good.
yeah, I mean, obviously Gina Crane's not come back yet, but we'll get to that when we get to that. Yeah, this is what was interesting, and I fear that if we've gone into it too much, would that have appeased someone that's watched it all too much? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think it's a fine balance, because if they'd have gone into that, you're going down like a rabbit hole of lore, and it could have very easily sounded like you're just quoting some kind of like Wikipedia article.
Yeah.
And then, what is Mandalore? What was the Purge? What was the two factions? What is the Darksaber? What is this? Who is Sati? And it would have completely just, people would have been like, whoa, too much. Like if they pepper it in, they've mentioned that we've seen the Darksaber. Let's go into this as a casual fan. Like when I saw the Darksaber, although I haven't watched all of Clone Wars, I knew what the Darksaber was. I may have not known all about its history, but it was the visual signifier. I knew that was something from the animated series, so it still had that impact on me. If you're watching this casual, you're like, oh, the bad guy's got a cool new lightsaber that we haven't seen before. And then we get it referred to it again in this, is like, does he have the Darksaber? We know now that it's significant in some way. I do hope towards the end of the series, we do get some kind of history as to the Darksaber, why it's important, why she wants to get it, and why it means so much to Moff Gideon for having the Darksaber. You mentioned that whoever kind of holds that has the power of Mandalore. But he's not, as far as we know, he's not on Mandalore. He's completely removed from Mandalore. Why does he want it? Why is it important to him? I think that is a crucial plot thing, which I have to assume will get explored later on in this series. Yeah. And I think there's a reason that they couple that with the ending where she asks specifically about that to an Imperial, which might be a good segue in a minute to talk more about that stuff, because I know we have some strong opinions on that. And also to see Moff Gideon reminding us of his presence and just how terrifying he is to his own people as well. I know I'm jumping ahead to the ending, but the Imperial officer who takes some kind of weird electrical cyanide capsule equivalent because he's saying, you could do this to me. Imagine what he's going to do to me. And he chooses death. So right there in that action, you know how bad Moff Gideon is. And we haven't seen much of him yet. I do really hope that it's not going to be like a 1 to 2 episode thing at the end. But there's a lot there with him. So yeah, I think if they do the history, and I think they've done it very well so far. You mentioned the Timothy Oliphant thing. That worked for a casual viewer. I haven't read that book in the new canon. So I think that worked. We got that handy flashback, which kind of served for that lore, I guess, that sort of history as to how we got it. They've done it very well with Bo-Katan so far. I'm sure we'll get sort of like a part 2 to it towards the end. Ahsoka's going to be the big one, though. And I think that might be, for where the character is in that moment, I think that might be unavoidable to go down a lore. Because as soon as she sees Baby Yoda, assuming that Baby Yoda comes into contact with her, she's going to be like, oh, I know this race, Jedi Master Yoda, when I was on the Jedi Council back in the prequel era, and blah, blah, blah. And then it begins. It's a risky move putting Ahsoka in it, I think. I know it's going to please a lot of fans. Ahsoka's kind of, especially with Clone Wars coming back, everyone loves Ahsoka. And I love Ahsoka, and I'm excited to see Ahsoka, but that's where it's going to hang in the balance, I think. And that will be a very interesting review come, we assume, 2 weeks' time when we get to that one.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to quickly harp on that too, because when I know you're watching Rebels, so I'm not going to give too much away. When they had the reveal that Ahsoka was the end of Rebels season 1, she walked down a flight of stairs. I'm Ahsoka Tano. Let's move on to the next room. And there was no Jedi Knight did this, did that, done the bell, survived 20 years, none of that. And it was a really smart way they brought her back. And then in season 2, we had her come occasionally in episodes. She'd come to Ezra. They'd have the odd discussion about the Force, about the Jedis and stuff like that. But you'd never get, I did this and this and this and this and this. Obviously, we got the great Vader and Ahsoka stuff, which was obviously integral. But this is what I'm not worried about, because I think he's done it in Rebels. Granted, it's a lot easier to go bring someone back in an animated series from an animated series than to bring him into live action. As what you mentioned, the casual fan is the most important thing. I'm the same as you. I think if we get a backstory for Cobb Vanth, I think they've got one for Mandalore. We were teased it at the end of season 1. Obviously, having the Darksaber, the fact he said, you survived the Purge, this happened. There was like a night, the long silent. There was that kind of generic "we massacred you all night" type speech. And we know we need to have that lore explained, and chucking it all at us in episode 3 is not going to do anyone any good. I think we're going to go back to Bo-Katan, and I think that there's going to be a conversation. I'm actually going to bring the first comment of the night from Carl, which is the Mandalorian is having his beliefs challenged, and we're seeing him change. I thought that exactly when the religion scene, when it's like, you're a cultist, taking the piss out of this is the way, that kind of thing. And again, it was bringing that, like, oh, he's been brought up in this way that he can't take his helmet off. He's had it since he's a kid, all this stuff. And I thought that was quite interesting. But going back to that sort of Darksaber stuff, that is tricky territory, because you mentioned, you knew bits of it. I watched with my dad, and not that you can use your family members as an example for everything, but he ain't ever going to watch an episode of Clone Wars or Rebels, and I wouldn't ask him to either. So when the Darksaber came up, he's like, oh, that's a different lightsaber. And I'm there. So there's a brilliant meme story that's gone viral today, guys. I won't show it off my phone. I did retweet it on my personal account. So, the Charlie Day meme?
Yeah.
With the red board. So it's like me watching Chapter 11 and my dad watching Chapter 11. And it's the Charlie Day red board going mad. And then it's that weird like bear meme where the guy's like looking over his shoulder like, the hell is he doing? And that's probably the best way I can describe when you're going to get these animated series stuff coming into live action, because even though they haven't explained it yet, they might not need to explain it. I'm just sat there like, so there's this video on the Darksaber on YouTube from Star Wars Rebels Season 4, and it explains the origins, like the Deathly Hallows, and it's a great video if you haven't watched it at home, guys. However, it's not something that can work in live action, just chucking that knowledge on people. And I know I'm sounding repetitive saying it, so I think this episode did a fantastic job of just getting it right. And it's what you mentioned, you sacrifice a bit of character, you don't learn too much. But I'd be worried if they touched upon it and didn't go into it enough. But we had that big moment. Does he have it? He already indicates she knows who Gideon is. They've got a backstory. We're going to find that out. Spoiler alert, the way Rebels ends, she's got the Darksaber and she's going to lead the Mandalore rebellion against the Empire. There has been nothing. And then there is the end of Season 1 where he talks about the night where he massacred them all. So clearly something happened. I thought Bo-Katan would be dead, and he would have killed her to have got the Darksaber. I spent a year thinking we might get a really cool flashback. We might still get flashbacks or something happening, but you messaged me earlier and mentioned it sort of being like Thor's hammer. It's kind of like that. It's very, very similar. That the difference of this is, to the Empire, it's a trophy. It'd be like if Thanos killed Thor and then Thanos wielded Yoda. That's exactly what Moff Gideon is right now, and that's why he's amazing, because we're getting so few amounts of time with him. But every time he speaks, every time he says anything, you are hooked on those words. And it might be like Gus from Breaking Bad or the pharmaceutical guy from The Boys. He is typecast to hell. That's because he is the guy you want to play that role. He can do the same thing over and over. And that's not criticism. That is the mightiest form of compliment. If you bring him into a project, it's because you know he's going to do a damn good job at being that villain. And I'm going to quickly, I know I've jumped a bit further than what I wanted to, but I'm going to bring up something Carl says. Did you find it interesting the Long Live the Empire was used? Yes. I didn't actually think of 9. I'm not going to lie. I didn't think of 9. However, it's that whole, what would the Nazis say after World War II? The ones that fled to Argentina were essentially in that part. And, their guy's gone, but they're still repping him. And it's one of those things where there's the remnants of the Empire. We had hints in last episode that we're searching for, Imperial hideouts, and we've got a guy with a Darksaber chilling somewhere where we don't know in the galaxy. And I just can't wait to get more of him. I really can't wait.
It really does kind of take the wind out of the whole ending montage of episode 6, doesn't it? With pulling the statue down, everyone in every planet suddenly rejoicing, and it's like, oh no, there's all these pockets of the Empire still. That would be realistic, though. They don't just sort of, it's not like Thanos clicking his fingers and everything's magically gone. No, there would still be people vying for power, and I like that Mandalorian's kind of shedding light on that. Just really quickly back to the Moff Gideon thing, and then we'll talk about everyone's mentioning Lost. I'm going to get onto the Lost thing. Don't worry. We're going to get onto it. The music as well. We now have that kind of leitmotif that plays every time Gideon's on. I can't describe the theme. It's almost like an electric guitar, very low, very guttural. It played again when we saw him. So obviously you're going to get that with Ludwig. He's going to continue those themes. Even in this episode, when the main Mando theme kicked in, you're just like, yes, like when it plays, it's such a great theme. I remember when it first played in season 1, and I said to you straight away, it just sounds like Rocky. This sounds really out of place for Star Wars. I don't like it. But my God, it is completely synonymous with this series now. And it's just so great. Whenever like an action scene happens and it kicks in, it's like, that's what music's all about. That's what it should do.
And in this one, whenever the Mandos appeared, they had their own little mini theme as well. It didn't sound like the main Mandalorian theme. It was like their own entrance. But I have to bring something up. I know it's irrelevant to the chat. There is an incredible, if people like F1, there is an incredible meme YouTube channel called Halfrican, and he basically does meme videos of every F1 race. However, this guy is a diehard Star Wars fan, and all of the music is the Mandalorian music. But whenever like the dark side appears, it's the Moff Gideon theme. It's called Arrival on the soundtrack, and I adore it. And the problem is, it's now ruined Mandalorian because whenever the song kicks in, I think of F1. But he has his own theme, and that is always the sign of a badass. And it's that like dun dun dun. I'm not going to do the whole thing, but it's the way Ludwig does it. And we raved about him at Tenet. I adored the Black Panther soundtrack. I love season 1. My biggest criticism of season 2 is they're not releasing the episode soundtracks weekly, because I'm not getting a chance to listen to that. As you had, whenever episode 1 came out last year, the episode was on Spotify on the same day. Not even a delay. They just got uploaded together. They've not done it this year, which is a real shame for me. But I love that Moff Gideon theme. And you know what's really cool? I know this is sad as well. Seeing the hologram in Star Wars, like you go back to The Empire Strikes Back, and it's the mini Vader. It doesn't need to be full size.
The tiny one on the dashboard.
The tiny one, and this was like mid shot dashboard, but we're not going to show his face till the end. You knew who he is. The moment he appeared, they knew, and they even bigged it up. And what I loved is even his dialogue. That you want backup, yeah, but they're already at the cargo hold, and he's like, yeah, you know what's about to happen. And I just loved that. That is something the Empire would do. They know it's lost. The moment they knew it's Mandalorians, that's all he needed to know. It's obviously these Mandalorians that keep cropping up, which we must learn about too. So I'm really hoping, off a side point before we get to the other things, we have more Bo-Katan and more Gideon, but in terms of both of them delivering backstories. I don't want Bo-Katan to be like, oh, he killed everyone and took the Darksaber and reigned supreme. I want another Moff Gideon speech where he has 100 stormtroopers outside of a building and he's just mocking them. And that's what I loved, is all of his dialogue in season 1 honestly made it. So it's a really interesting dynamic that we can learn more about the background of 2 characters. So I really hope they get to play into that and they don't tease something too much for season 3. Not jumping the gun. I don't think we're getting Jango Fett back. Sorry, not Jango, Boba. We're definitely getting Jango Fett back. I don't think we're going to get Boba this series now. I think they're done on Tatooine. I think it'd be detrimental to go back. They're clearly heading towards a bigger picture now with Mandalore, with Ahsoka. We've got 5 episodes left, so I think the time for this almighty Boba versus Mandalorian dream is down the drain. Good riddance to it. And hopefully Moff Gideon can reign supreme.
You say this, but guarantee that finale, we're going to see that desert planet again, and we're all going to roll our eyes like, oh, for God's sake, here we go again. I want to bring this comment up by Carl, because I am going to go slightly negative, not too negative, but this is where sort of like my average part review of the episode comes in. So he says the cinematography was stunning in this episode. We've mentioned that at the beginning, but yeah, like everything I'm about to say about the action here, it looks incredible. Visually, just top marks, can't knock it. Now, this is where I'm going to go into it. So Titus Welliver, fantastic actor. Matt says he was great on Lost. He was the guy in Bosch. I haven't seen that, but I have seen Lost. And Carl right there as well. The officer who took the suicide pill also played the man in black in Lost. Fantastic actor, really villainous presence in that TV series. And he was also in Transformers 4 as a character we both really like. Yeah, no, great line. Terrible film, awful film, but my face is the warrant. That line you could almost bring into Star Wars as an Imperial officer. I'd love him sort of like knocking on doors, with a bunch of stormtroopers behind him. My face is the warrant. That would have been great. Unfortunately, his character dies this episode, and you get an actor of that caliber. It's like, why would you kill him off? Maybe he only wanted to be in one episode. Maybe he's a fan. Maybe he was on set that day. Maybe he was visiting or passing through or something. It's like, get him in an Imperial outfit and get him in an episode of Mandalorian. This is going to sound sort of like really, I don't know, patriotic, maybe. I don't know. But again, and a thing that's been established in Star Wars since its creation. The Imperial officer should be British. It's just kind of a thing. I'm sorry, guys. Like, whether you've got like an American, an Australian, whoever it happens to be, they always kind of do a British accent as an Imperial officer. We've seen that in the original, bringing in, oh God, what's his name? Oh God, No, Peter Cushing. Peter Cushing.
Yes,
Jesus,
Peter, yeah.
Christ! Absolute brain fart. And all of these fantastic sort of British actors that played with the Imperial officers, even in the sequel trilogy, like, you know, say what you want, they still did that as well. It's a small thing, and I'm not saying that you have to be British to be employed by the Empire, but you kind of have to be British to be employed by the Empire. It was that kind of, it's sort of in the same lines that you were mentioning earlier about the Mon Calamari voice and everything like that. It's so small, but it's something that does kind of take you out and go, oh, that's not right. You know, it's a small thing. If anyone else had this problem, do let us know, because maybe this is just us talking, but I'm glad that you also thought the same thing as well. And it's a shame because he's fantastic. I would have loved to have seen him play a different character. I think he would have been a great bounty hunter kind of guy, some other kind of villainous role other than just sort of he's credited actually as a, I mean, I'm sure Wikipedia will change this. We'll have a novel come out. We'll have something come out which fills in the blanks for this guy. He is credited as unidentified Imperial captain. You don't cast Titus Welliver to play unidentified Imperial captain. I'm sorry, you just don't do it. You don't do it. He was great for like the 5-10 minutes he was in. There's nothing much else I can say, really. My problem is with the action in this moment. Sorry, I'll just throw this out there. And this is where we kind of differ. You're fine with stormtroopers dying by the wayside. I get that. We've seen that from the original Star Wars. That's always been a thing. But where you have like this huge action set piece of these 4 Mandalorians, these 4 impervious Mandalorians in this armor that no blaster bolt is going to hit them. You know they're not going to die. You know they're all going to make it through it. When you have to sit through an action scene, it's just like, okay, this is boring. Let's get to the plot. Like, we know what's going to happen. None of them can be touched. None of them are in peril. And when you've got an elongated action scene towards the end of the episode, you've got to feel tension. There's got to be that excitement. There's got to be something there. It's like the scenes in episode 9 where Poe, Finn, Chewie, and Rey are just running throughout the corridor and just, you know, popping stormtroopers left, right, and center. It's just so boring. And Star Wars has come a long way. You can do more now. I felt tension in episode 7 and 8 of season 1 with Gideon standing outside with the Death Troopers and the Stormtroopers. I felt that. I felt like they were cornered. They had no way out. They would be massacred if they took one step outside. Don't get that with this. It's just, let's get to the shooty shoot, pew pew, and they're all going to be fine and they're all impervious. Why am I watching this or concerned about this?
Yeah, and this is where we're going to differ. Before I get to that, sorry, I do want to make a comment on the officers. Same boat. And I'm not sounding xenophobic. When they start speaking, I was like, something's not right in my head. Like, I'm not hearing what I'm seeing. And it took me a couple of seconds to realize is that the first American officer? And I sat there in my head like, well, even Captain Panaka was British. We had the New Zealand sort of replacement because he didn't want to film over in Australia. I know they're not Imperial officers, but you got Tarkin. Krennic tried a British accent to a point, but you know, and he was great. But we've never had the outright. I mean, if Krennic had a proper Australian accent, you get bits of it. You can hear bits of it, but we don't care because we love Ben Mendelsohn. But when it's too, and I've had this issue. We spoke. Maybe the SNL stuff is maybe overboard in terms of me saying I'm sick and fed of Americans. Absolutely not. You know, we know this is the first Star Wars property filmed in America for, my gosh, since the Return of the Jedi. I mean, you know, there's a reason. You know, I was like, even Officer Number 2, the pointless one he got thrown through the cargo bay doors was American. It's like, doesn't sound something just off. And you sort of say, well, Moff Gideon's American. It's like, yeah, that's the big bad villain. Like, the reason that what makes Star Wars is these irrelevant characters, and that's the beauty of Star Wars. Star Wars has always been about irrelevant characters, stupid people who become icons overnight. You know, there's a Ben Quadranaris. There's oh my god, I'm just dropping blanks. The Lord and Savior Coleman Treebor. Star Wars has always been about that, and even these small officers do get those roles. Even Hux was not. He was supporting in Force Awakens, but he got extended roles in 8 and then reduced to an atom in 9. And yeah, bringing in Richard Grant, and it's just always felt right. I'm not criticizing the fact that they're American at all. It's more that when you've had this thing that's unofficially been a thing for 40 plus years, it is hard to make a difference to it. And
it's that stiff upper lip British imperialistic, like, intensify forward firepower. You know, it's part of the image, and especially because it's been established, when you do shake that up, it is different. And Matt says here, Love the show, but it's noticeably more American to me in general.
Yeah,
I'd say definitely same with season 1, but they're kind of doubling down on it in season 2 to me this year.
Yeah, and aside from that, let's talk action. So this is where we're going to differ, and it's fine to differ. We're over our arguments from Last Jedi.
Are we? Are we?
I think
every now and then we stir the pot.
Yeah,
every now and then.
It's like every couple of months, like you kind of sit back and I mesh like, oh, is it that time of the year? Anyway, that being said, so this is where the thing is, when you mentioned season 1, episode 8, if it wasn't Moff Gideon outside that building, if it wasn't Death Troopers, would you feel they're at risk? Maybe. Because Mando's there, maybe. They had a flame troop, they had all the other troopers. And of course, you've got Gina Carano, who's a wrestler, well, UFC fighter, not a very smart person. Let's not talk about it yet. And you've got Apollo Creed. Like, yeah, we know they can do some stuff if they want to. But you take away Gideon, you take away the Death Troopers, the Flame Trooper, it's just another bunch of Stormtroopers we know they're going to massacre. But to me, that changed when... And also, you had Moff Gideon kill Werner Herzog as well. He's already identified himself as a threat. He's killing his own people. So that always happened in season 1, was we were introduced to the big bad villain of the series. But when you've got, a relevant officer on board a cargo shuttle getting stolen by pirates, and it's like, okay, the Stormtroopers, they're not going to do well. But, and maybe this is going back to the fact that the animated series stuff I've followed, the reputation of the Mandalorians is second to none. In Rebels, they create basically a killing device that can melt them inside their armor because they can't penetrate it. I'm not going to spoil weapons in that story arc. But they obviously find a way around it. It's really hard. The problem is because I completely understand your point that we know they're going to breeze through them like they're nothing, and they are nothing. And that's the point of them being Stormtroopers. But if we're going to get 4 Mandalorians on screen, they shouldn't be wearing the armor if they're going to struggle against an endless wave of Storm. It's like playing Battlefront 2. You're not going to struggle if you're in a Mandalorian armor against, a Stormtrooper. And maybe that's me looking at it too in depth in a Star Wars point of view. And maybe because, we've just been reintroduced to Bo-Katan, it's irrelevant. If Moff Gideon's in that ship, then yeah, it shouldn't be that easy. If there was Death Troopers, it shouldn't be easy. But I think because they'd already said it's an endless wave of Stormtroopers, I just sat back like, okay, we're going to see live action Mandalorians now beating this shit into live action Stormtroopers, because that's ultimately the way Rebels goes for anyone. Rebels does it too much. And going back to Taika with episode 1, when he has the scout trooper missing the can, maybe the most sort of in-depth Star Wars humor there's ever been to itself that people don't get, others do. I just didn't expect. I just wanted to sit back and say, I want this to look cool, because it needs to look cool, because you need to establish these badasses. We saw them, kill a couple of quarry people on a boat. That's not that cool. It was a nice scene, but that's not what they're here for. But for them to dismantle and just massacre the Stormtroopers was excellent. And I know you're going to mention the armor, because we did speak about that as well. That it was a weird thing, like the self-sacrifice that, he does only make it halfway there. And I know they are bigging up that armor that it is Beskar. It was a bit strange for him to sort of do it. And last episode I didn't even notice until today, he got headshotted at the beginning when the bounty hunters trying to get him. I know the armor is important, but it was weird to see him get shot down to pieces. But at least he didn't just run through all the way through and deflect everything and meet the other end and fight them. But I completely understood that, your side of it. And I think it's very interesting, the discussion point, because if I didn't have the knowledge of the Mandalorians, if I was maybe more, I'm not saying you're casual because you're not, you know a lot more than 90 people. And there will be people that just want to sit back. And actually, there'll be people that want to sit back and say, okay, they're not struggling here. But I think because of who was in these scenarios, that's why I'm kind of okay with it, if that makes sense. That if Gideon's in front of the ship and he's commanding his forces and they're getting embarrassed, that to me would be a big issue, because that villain loses credibility. But when they're up against irrelevant people, against Mandalorian warriors, I just don't see it being a competition.
No, that's fair. And you have to sort of remember what the TV show is as well. It's just meant to sort of be Star Wars fun, essentially. If I was going to rewrite that scene, what I would do is, especially if you're going to stick with the 4, I think they could have got away with 2, just Mando and Bo-Katan. I don't think you needed the other 2 in there, unless they do something with them, but I don't see them doing anything with them, really. I would have, because I thought the Beskar was like the prime, the creme de la creme in terms of armor that you could possibly wear. That stuff would deflect blaster bolts. That's fair enough. I'm happy for Mando to have that, and especially the self-sacrifice moment you mentioned where he is getting peppered and he does sort of fall to his knees and it is a last-ditch effort to throw the grenades at the end. That's fine. But maybe the other ones, maybe one could have got hit. Maybe the armor's not as great. Now, I know the Mandalorians, the armor would be good, but not to the level of Mando.
Yeah.
So maybe they are more, they are more pervious to stuff like that. One could have got hit. There would have been stakes there. Maybe one could have even died. One of the side ones, who knows? And there's some there's some sacrifice to that mission they were trying to get the spoils from that ship. I think there's a bunch of stuff that you could have done, and you could have still had Mando's moment where he does his daring moment at the end. That's fine because he's sort of outfitted to be that. I think you could have written it that way, where you still have them being badass. Maybe the one who's played by a wrestler, we could have seen some of those wrestling moves. Maybe she could have utilized the environment. Maybe in terms of it could have cut to a fist fighting, which looks like a wrestling move, or some grapple moves. I think there's a bunch of things you could have done to make that a bit more engaging, to fit the characters, the people who have been cast to play those characters. And, like everyone says, like, oh, well, they're stormtroopers, they always get shot. That's always how it has been. But we've seen, in some ways, we've seen a devolution, but evolution in terms of Star Wars, them adding a lot more female characters to the cast, which is something that wasn't so much there in the originals. We've seen it adapt in certain ways and poke fun at and critique and sort of dismantle some of those tropes from earlier Star Wars films. Change that Stormtrooper one then. Make them a threat. This is your opportunity to do that. We're in 2020. Adapt it. I just think there are some things they could have done, small tweaks here and there, that would have added a bit more stakes to that ending. It's fine. It looks great, as we've said constantly, but it just didn't have that tension for me in the action scenes as some of them have. The Crate Dragon, I think they're going to be really hard pushed to top that. I mentioned that in terms of Star Wars action, that's probably some of the best I've seen since Rogue One, because I did really think the action was up there with Rogue One. Carl says an interesting comment here. I did feel the Mandalorian took a back seat in this episode a bit too much. I can see why you might think that. Yeah. I think it's because he's being bombarded with this information and he's kind of observing things around him and things that are bigger than him that he doesn't know about. I won't say he took a back seat. I still think it is focused on him and he gets sort of like the highlights. Maybe it's from introducing a bunch of new characters and information where it feels like it's been diluted a bit. I'm not sure.
That made me think of episode 6. I know you don't like it. I'm not a massive fan, but the first half, until they turn on him, he is at the back of the group. They're doing
more of an ensemble episode.
Yeah,
isn't it? Yeah.
And I think this one was that Mando's here, but we're here to show off these guys around us, and that's what I think they're focused on. Now, the Sasha Banks was interesting because I don't follow wrestling like I used to. Her rise was really good, but obviously the way it works in wrestling, if someone's got an injury for 6 months and then the next day the report is that they're filming Mandalorian, hopefully it means we know she's in more than one episode, because if it is this one, they've wasted. I don't think it will just be this one. I think we do need more from her. I think we will get more from her. I hope we do. Fun fact for those that don't know, she is related to Snoop Dogg. I think they're second cousins. Yeah, so maybe we'll get there'll be like this one Mandalorian, like just smoke puffing out of the helmet, and you will know, like, they don't even need to say anything, it'll be him. But aside from Snoop Dogg in Star Wars, I get that. It's going to be interesting because you mentioned that the crate was unreal. We had the IMAX cameras with everything. If this is that kind of not mid-season, but like, episode 3, like, we're not hitting the core of the story yet. We've got things to come. We had the TIE fighter at the end of the last season. We had the amazing shootout outside the building in the bar. I really hope that, I'm not saying I don't want the Crate Dragon to be the best action scene. It's a phenomenal scene. I'm really hoping we've got some good Moff Gideon stuff. And going back again to that Clone Wars Rebel stuff, I need to see that Darksaber in action, in live action. There's a rumor on Monday they're going to announce the Darksaber as like a 150 quid lightsaber, which I'm scared about pressing pre-order. So I ordered the Mandalorian helmet this week. So I'm intrigued. I think it's pushed things in the right way. And to be fair, what I will say, going back to director stuff, is because I know we're kind of wrapping up now, I thought this was Robert Rodriguez's episode. Obviously, they never say who's doing it early, except next week, because they've already spoiled it. The shootout, the guns, the Western feel, I thought this was Robert Rodriguez, the pure action. When it hit Bryce Dallas Howard in the credits, I was completely blown away. I'm not criticizing her as a director. It was the first thing she did last year, episode 4. And I didn't mind the ATST stuff. It was fine. It was very maternal. You had the side story with the woman and her daughter. And it was like, okay, I can see that was a Bryce Dallas Howard episode. She's very maternal. She's got kids. She takes on roles in that sense. And then it was her doing action. And I don't want to sound rude because I absolutely love Ron Howard. She directed better action than he did in Star Wars. And, for her second or third project, I was blown away. And that's not right complex. Again, Robert Rodriguez's history, that Tarantino, that shoot him up type thing, you would think that was Robert Rodriguez's episode today, and it wasn't. And I was really pleasantly surprised by that. So massive sort of, not thanks, but really nice surprise. And next week we know is directed by Carl Weathers, who said it online the other day. So, if there's some boxing match, a great way to tease up our Rocky reviews, it'd be obvious. But I don't know what he's going to bring to the table. But she's brought something else I didn't see. Whereas Peyton Reed last week kind of disappointed me, being politely honest. But yeah, I don't know if I'm rambling at this point, so I'm going to pass it back over to you.
Yeah, no, and you raised the spectre of episode 6 from season 1. Did we get a glimpse in the trailer for this series of those characters returning? Because they did leave it kind of open-ended. I hope we don't go back to them. I'm kind of worried that we're going to get another filler episode. But in terms of structure, I'm trying to compare this to season 1, and certainly with the ending, with Mandalorians being involved with this sort of skirmish, this shoot 'em up at the end, very similar to episode 3 from season 1 in how it's going at the moment. Although I will say they've definitely ramped up the action this series compared to last time. Up until that point, I think we just had a little skirmish in the town, the shoot 'em up with IG-11. We had the Mudhorn scene, we had the sand crawler, and then we had the ending to episode 3. This one, we've had spiders, we've had an entire almost film climax with the crate dragons. So they've definitely ramped it up now.
X-wing chase as well.
Yeah, it's all looking incredible. I hope they can maintain that as the series goes on, and they haven't sort of blew the budget. I think I said that though in episode 1, saying have they blown the budget in episode 1 and the rest is going to dip? It hasn't dipped yet. Maybe slightly, because nothing's going to top that crate dragon thing. Visually, that was the CGI in that was unreal. The last little bit, I guess. Oh, go on. Sorry.
Sorry, I would say going back to the crate dragon. It's the fact it wasn't a planet; it was Tatooine. Not that made it better, but the imagery, the colors, all that kind of stuff that came together to make that seem better. Versus Snow White ice planet running away. Good versus darkness where it's bright. The crate dragon was just phenomenal. Jumping on that, but I'm going to pass over to you. Sorry.
Yeah, so just the last bit, and this is actually going to tie into Carl's comment right there, because I think that is a topic, that is a concern that we've brought up a lot. Yeah. So the last thing is that Bo-Katan tells Mando to find a Jedi called Ahsoka Tano, obviously in the city of Caladon on the forest planet of Corvus. And then his ship is repaired, and then he flies off to presumably go to that. Maybe not, because we've got a sneaky suspicion that that's going to be episode 5, and there will be an episode in between that. So maybe he's going to go back and recruit Carl Weathers. As you said, it's directed by Carl Weathers the next episode, and that guy's ego, to me, would tell me that he is wanting to star in that episode as well, the one that he's directing. So we'll have to see. Maybe we'll have another in-between episode, and then they'll save Ahsoka for sort of that almost middle kind of break where the plot really kicks in. But Carl does raise a good concern here. I do also feel they're slowly using the Mandalorian show as a proxy to create another season of the Clone Wars, and that everything is going to be riding on episode 5 for me. They've kind of handled it well enough this episode. It is that rabbit hole that they could go down, and I think if any episode is going to do that, it is going to be episode 5. We're going to have to wait and see. That is a concern that we've brought up when we saw the cast list with all these characters coming back. You mentioned Rex as well as coming back. As long as they don't alienate the average fans, that's fine. It is a concern, though, and I do think that if they do sort of throw all these characters in that we remember, it is kind of taking away from the fact that Mandalorian is this standalone thing to create its own characters, its own lore, and I think that could be a problem. That's a real shame, because we saw season 1 do a great job of that. We hoped that 2 would continue that, and it is to a degree. But if they are just going to lump all these characters in that we recognize or hardcore fans recognize, it is taking away from what The Mandalorian could be, which is its own thing, its own self-contained story, adding new things to the lore and not relying on all that animated stuff. So I do think it is a concern to bring up, but we won't know if it's going in that direction or if it becomes that until we're past that mid-episode and maybe even after we've finished season 2.
Yeah, it's a really important thing as well, because it's going to be massive, and there will be people again that haven't heard of Ahsoka, that haven't seen photos of her, they don't know anything, and they're going to walk into this. And Rebels again is a good point. When Rebel season 2 came out, Rebel season 1 was you had Ahsoka at the end, but it was like, okay, that was that Disney show. And season 2 was like, here's some Clone Wars survivors, here's some bounty hunters, here is Ahsoka Tano, here is Darth Vader and Ahsoka Tano. And you knew this stuff was coming, but it never took it away from the fact the series was about the Rebels crew. And that's his one credit. And that's why I've got more ease with Filoni. However, the worry is this was a lot of people spoke about online. It's not a diss at all. Because Ahsoka is his character, it's him and Lucas's creation. It's like his child to a point. You know, his sketches are incredible, the stuff he's done when he's online. And when the Ahsoka stuff came out last year that should be in it, you had a lot of people, and like myself, that love him, think he's great. He's got a lot of fans. Ahsoka's a phenomenal character. She's surviving 3 years of Star Wars right now. And I'm not saying people have to die, but there becomes a point when one must move on. And I think he's even made comments. Yeah, I think he's said it in the past. He's done a photo of like a goodbye Ahsoka type thing. And, you know, is it going to be hopefully 1 or 2 seasons of it? I hope so. I don't want it teasing up a live action Ahsoka series. There's always been talk of Finding Ezra. Finding Ezra, I think, is going to be animated. It's got to be animated, but it'd be a smart way of doing it. But if it's his moment that he's co-created this series with Jon Favreau and he wants to get her in, that's fine. But I need to see how it goes because I trust him and I trust the process and I trust Favreau watching over him as well with this series. I don't think we're going to get anything too extreme, but it is a very potential thing. And as you said, this show is called The Mandalorian. You know, it didn't take it away.
Yeah,
it didn't take it away from the Rebels crew, and that's why I hope they take over this. This is his show, and obviously, ultimately, is a big plot point because Baby Yoda needs to go to a Jedi, and you kind of mentioned earlier that she'll know of Yoda and stuff, and I think that's going to be the episode we get the most lore drop, the most knowledge, and all that stuff. And I don't know how they're going to do it. You know, I'd rather she popped up at the final frame of episode 4, knowing before we're going to get the Ahsoka in episode 5, rather than this big reveal to a 2-minute scene. Because I always go back to when Maul cropped up for the Kenobi duel in Rebels. It was the most hyped up scene in history, and as time has gone by, it's developed to me as one of the best. I can't really call it a duel, but one of my favorite Star Wars moments is that scene now, and that was an insane build-up to 30 seconds, and that's where the issue came from for a lot of people, which I also understand. And if we're going to get Ahsoka, we really can't defer away from the plot of the Mandalorian. Get Gideon in. That's all I'm going to say.
That's the plot I want to see kick in. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say the last thing I want to see is Ahsoka Tano versus Moff Gideon in the duel because she's too powerful now. You know, she's on Vader's level. She's not on Vader. She would have died, but the people she's fought against her history in Star Wars canon. You know, she's done Maul. She's been against Vader. She's been trained by Anakin. Moff Gideon's going to be a slice of cake for her. So I'd rather those two are kept away at all circumstances because ultimately at this point in time, people shouldn't really have known Jedis except Luke Skywalker, and I like it that way.
Well, according to Ahsoka, but she's not a Jedi, right? She basically is.
Well,
let's be fair.
Yeah,
she basically
good point, actually, yeah.
JX Editor says, isn't it weird how there are so many more cute Baby Yoda shots this season? I don't think that's weird at all. That is Disney, my friend. No, exactly. Disney are giving the people what they want. They know what people responded to, and by God, they responded to Baby Yoda. They were flying off the shelves. People want more Baby Yoda. They want more Baby Yoda. Guess what? They're giving us more Baby Yoda, more cute shots. They're doubling down on it because, by God, they've got to sell some Christmas toys this year, and I'm going to buy one.
Tournament. You can. I've been given permission to put a Baby Yoda on our family Christmas tree.
There you go. Like it's happening. Christmas tree ornaments. I believe there's a new animatronic one coming out, which says 25 phrases. Yeah,
Toys Lifestyle, £400, and it looks incredible, but I can't buy it. Behind me, sorry, Lego Baby Yoda, brand new. Above me, other Baby Yoda. So there's two there. You know what? And I'll go back to. I know this is off topic from today, but man, that reveal being kept quiet. To me, maybe one of the greatest kept secrets in the history of TV and film, Baby Yoda. And I'll tell you what, if we knew he was coming, people wouldn't have reacted the way they did.
This is the thing with Disney. Like, I want to like them, but they're so manipulative. They've got the best people. The concept art, the sketches. It'll be like, right, give him some big eyes and make him look cute. That's Disney's resolution to everything in animation. Just give them big eyes. Big doughy eyes and make him look cute and make him cool. And it works. It works. They're geniuses, and that's why they keep making money. God love them. But yeah, I think I've pretty much said everything I can on this episode. This was sort of a mixed episode for me. I appreciate what it was doing in terms of, compared to the other two episodes. This one's definitely moving the plot along, and that's good. I want to see the plot move along. These are positives. There's just a few things there, like I mentioned, like the ending action scene didn't really have much tension. I thought some of the characters were kind of wasted or downplayed, or I didn't really get much personality from them. But it is setting it up in an interesting direction, and I hope they continue to go in that direction and not meander too much and sort of get to the point of what they're trying to do. I don't want to get through the end of season 2 and we've had like one Moff Gideon scene, because that's not cool. He needs to be in it more. So yeah, that'll do it for our review on chapter 11, the HEIRESS. So we will be back next Friday at 10 p.m. again to review episode 4, whatever that's called, whoever's directing that. I don't know if we have that information right now. We probably don't, but we are back weekly at all those times. So George, over to you one more time for the final socials.
Yes, as we said, guys, best way to find out what we're doing is getting us on all the social medias. So obviously, if you're already watching, thanks for obviously getting to the end. It's been a long one today, longer than episodes 2 and 3 combined. But of course, the best way to help us is to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It's that weird YouTube algorithm. We're getting better with it. Massive thanks. Our watch time is flying through the roof right now with Lockdown 2. So massive thanks to those that stick around checking out our videos. Haven't already seen it, we had a great video earlier this week. 15 video games we want to see turned into films. It went on quite a while, and I guess we can unofficially announce that we're going to do something similar this Monday. We're going to reverse it on itself. We're going to do 10 films / universes we want to see as video games. We'll have more details as and when. However, as what we can say, the best way to find out as and when is on our Facebook. So Cinema Savvy on Facebook and at Cinema_Savvy on Twitter. And if you want to pick up merch on TeePublic, we've got a link in the description below. We've got a couple more cool announcements to make, which we're going to do over the coming days. And I shall once again bring up the thumbnail for the Lego Star Wars Holiday Special Watch Along next Wednesday, the 18th of November at 10 p.m. Like, as we said, we're going to be live. We're going to be watching this for the first time. We're going to have no knowledge of it. I'm not expecting anything. In the politest way, I hope we have a good time. It's a laugh. If you're going in to expect an hour and 10 minute discussion on Star Wars lore, we ain't going to get that. So fingers crossed that it's not like the other holiday special, but we're also. I guess
I hope it is. I hope it is.
We're going to be watching on Disney Plus, and we're going to figure out this new party thing. So maybe we can share details before we go live for people that want to do it on the Disney Plus party. I think you can have 6 people, so we'll iron out some more details over the weekend. But that being said, let's finish it off once more. We've spoke about the great man Apollo Creed, Carl Weathers. His episode is next Friday. We'll be discussing episode 4 next Friday, and we'll be discussing, unfortunately, not Rocky 4 next Tuesday. It's Rocky 3 this week. So Rocky 3, 10 p.m. this Tuesday. Me and you'll be watching it over the weekend. It's going to have good fun. If you haven't already checked them out, got Rocky 1 and 2 reviews on the channel now, which we've had a blast. I said the comments have been incredible, probably funner than me and you talking about it, in all honesty, because we're both being told facts we've never known existed. And I guess that's the last thing I'm going to say. So, as usual, I'm going to pass over to Chris.
Yeah, George has just said everything. So a big thank you to everyone that's been commenting today. JX Editor, Carl, Matt, you guys are great. And we hope to see you next week when we do the next episode of Mandalorian. And until then, we'll see you guys next time. Take care.